fellow citizens. At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
It was the most intensive bombing campaign against Baghdad yet. From where I was standing on the balcony of the hotel where I'm staying, I could see building after building, one after another. I could see the bombs striking them, the missiles falling from the sky and reducing them to rubble. There were fires burning, the plumes of smoke rising hundreds of feet into the air.
You are subject to arrest. This has been determined to be an unlawful assembly. Anyone not leaving the area is subject to arrest.
By 2:30 that afternoon, 42 people remained sitting at the Crossroads. They were politely arrested, but the charges carried a possible 6-month jail term. Some pled no contest in exchange for community service or minimal jail time, but 17 pled not guilty and proceeded to trial. The prosecutor asserted that these defendants threatened society with anarchy if not found guilty. Although lightly sentenced, the Nevada City judges found all but one of the defendants guilty on a variety of charges. Some paid fines, while others chose jail. Many people from the community completely understood why these upstanding citizens sat down in the Crossroads. Some did not, and others were even angered.
God bless you. Chicken shit!
This series focuses on the individual defense and aims to provide better understanding for this peaceful yet, to some, intolerable resistance.
I had already gone to Sacramento and to San Francisco at peace marches to oppose the war that's coming. But I felt it was more important to do it locally, because I've lived here 28 years, and I think it's important to make your statement where you are known, where people can see me and know who I am and what I care about and what I do. I think my testimony is more worthwhile in my own town because I belong here and have been a part of many things. So that was why I would do it here.
Before making this decision to sit down in the street, had you tried other methods of expressing your views to the government?
Oh, yes.
Would you explain some of those?
Well, I've written letters and emails to congressmen. I have, as I said, gone to the peace rallies in Sacramento and San Francisco, and I have joined the peace group, the local peace group, and when it was formed, I had bumper stickers on my car that expressed my opinion. Anybody asks me, I would tell them.
What specifically did you hope would come from your sitting in the center of that street?
I didn't believe it would end the war. I wished it would. But I think the fact that it's being done all over the country and in many other countries, that I wanted to add my body, myself, to the multitudes that really don't want war and that really do want peace. And I think everybody counts. And I wanted my children and grandchildren to know how I feel. So I wrote them and told them why I was doing what I do.
And what did you tell them was your purpose in doing what you did?
I want them to live in a peaceful world, and I think that it's important for each person to say what they believe and think, and to use the freedom of speech we now have, but may be losing while we have it. And I think the Patriot Act may destroy that, so that now is the time that it's very important to stand and say what you really believe. So I've told my kids that.
By the way, how many children?
I have 6 children and 19 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. And most of them understand it.
Did you go to that intersection with the intent to break any law?
No,
Did you go to that intersection with the intent to be arrested?
no. Though people had said it might happen, that was not my pleasure.
In the,
I don't think it's wrong to be arrested. My husband was arrested as a conscientious objector.
Objection, Your Honor.
All right.
Sustained. The answer is struck. He's non-responsive.
well, let's go back to your experiences with, that be World War I or World War II?
Well,
World War
in
II?
World War I,
Objection,
I
Your
was...
Honor. That is irrelevant as to what her husband did in World War I or II.
I don't know what the question was going to be.
Would you say it again, please?
She's going to ask a question, but wait before you answer because Mr. Pong's going to object.
Other members of your family are pacifists, is that correct?
Yes,
And that included your husband?
yes.
And in standing up for his beliefs of peace and not war, was he a conscientious objector?
Objection, Your Honor. That is 352.
Well, I don't know, but it's wrong. So sustained. She's going to ask another question.
While you were sitting there at the intersection, could you describe some of the things you observed?
Well,
Calls for narrative, Your Honor. Yes. Objection.
Offer of proof?
Well, we're going to get to what the people were doing around her and whether or not that was part of what was planned by this group.
I'll let you go into it a little bit to make sure we don't spend too much time. Go ahead.
Ms. Palley, after you sat down in the center of the intersection, could you describe what you observed and what happened next?
The people who circled around, a lot of them I knew and came over and said good, or thank you, or I felt a lot of positive response for people that were not in our group. And I was surprised when people joined us. I didn't know that we would become such a big group.
Was that part of the original plan to have other people join you?
Not mine.
During the discussions that the affinity group had about this particular action, did any of you, do you recall any of you anticipating that the marchers would stop at that intersection?
I don't know what any of us did. I can only say that I didn't.
Were you surprised when the marchers stopped at the intersection?
Yes, I thought they would go around us and onto the park.
Was it your intent to be, the 12 or 13 of you that sat down, was it your intent to be left there by yourselves?
I didn't have a plan. I didn't think about that.
Did you think that the entire street would be blocked with marchers?
No.
In retrospect, do you think that what you did that day was reasonable?
Objection, Your Honor. That goes to a
That's-
wrongful state of mind.
Sustained.
That is part of the state of mind.
I rule on it. Sustained.
Your Honor, could I request that the court allow us to go sidebar for a couple minutes to discuss our in-chambers conference the other day and the ground rules?
But we can do it at the break.
Okay.
Okay.
You've already discussed some of your purposes in sitting in that intersection. I just want to make sure that you haven't, that I've given you an opportunity to discuss why you were there that day.
Well, I believe in freedom of speech. And I believe that one reason I should be doing that is that I am 85 years old. And that I agree with Maggie Kuhn that the seniors are the people that can take risks to do the things that they think are important. Their families aren't depending upon them, and they're free. So I'm one of those that's free. Nobody needs me for something else. I'm not leaving a job to go and do this. I'm the one that should be doing it.
And what is it you think you should be doing?
Taking a stand against war, or taking a stand for life and freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, all the things that our Constitution offers us and we still have.
Did you, at the time you sat down there, did you have a plan for how that would end that day?
I believed it would bring us closer together to take some action together.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Walker?
Thank you. Ms. Palley, were you, we heard some testimony earlier about is it the Peace Center of Nevada County? Are you familiar with that organization?
Yes.
Are you actually a member of that?
It doesn't have a membership, I think.
Okay.
I support it financially. I attend meetings.
Okay. Were you aware of a plan to have a march at a particular time relative to bombing? Could you please explain that?
Explain my awareness.
Yeah, explain what your understanding was. And I'm still trying to get a handle on the relationship, if any, between the core group or the affinity group, as Ms. Kaufman has referred to your group, and this Peace Center. Is it an offshoot, or is it a smaller grouping of the Peace Center, or is it a subgroup of the Peace Center?
I don't think the Peace Center says it's a subgroup of it.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Did the affinity group go out of its way not to tell other people what your plan was that day of the march?
Objection or lack of foundation relevance.
Well, it's kind of a good point. You said earlier you can only talk for yourself. Is that right? Okay. So did you yourself talk to other people besides the members of the affinity group and tell them what your plan was on the day of the march?
Not locally, probably my family.
Okay. Did you in any way encourage anybody else to sit down in the street with the affinity group? You're shaking your head no?
No.
You have to answer verbally so this young lady can take on your response.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And why not?
I thought it was an advantage in being about the size it was, that we got to know each other. And besides those of us that sat down, there was a support group of friends who knew why we were doing what we were doing and would help us if we needed anything.
How long or how many occasions did the affinity group discuss with your presence this particular plan to sit down in the middle of the intersection?
Maybe 3 or 4.
And at those meetings, did you ever discuss yourself or hear anyone discuss whether or not the intention was to close down the town or obstruct traffic? You never heard any discussion about that whatsoever?
Don't remember.
Okay. On the day here, the demonstration now, turning to that day, did you guys in the affinity group break out as planned from the main body of the marchers and set up your protest in the middle of the intersection?
You're asking a couple things.
Okay. Pick one.
You said you guys. I'm only one person, and I did something different than the others did.
Okay. What did you do that day?
I walked from the corner of by Callahan Park straight up to that street because I was a little bit tired. And I walked with Saul Rayo, who was my support person at that occasion. I said, I'd rather not go all that way around, let's go up. So the two of us did that.
Okay. And did you bring your paint bucket with you?
No.
Did Saul bring your paint bucket?
He brought a duffel bag with a cushion for me to sit on because he felt sorry for an old lady.
That's sweet.
So,
Okay. And so did you then walk from Callahan Park and just take up your position in the intersection? When you sat down, where was the marchers? Were they inside of you? Could you see the rest of the marchers coming?
they were coming down Broad Street.
Based on your perception, when the main group of the affinity group were sitting down, did you ever encourage anyone else to join you?
No.
No one in the crowd. You weren't asking other people to ever. You never did that?
No.
Okay. Were you concerned for the safety of these people?
No.
Okay. Did you think that your plan was to stay there until you were arrested?
No, I didn't think about arrest.
Did you ever ask an officer to arrest you?
No.
Did you yourself, for instance, complain that they were arresting you too slowly?
No.
And are you sure that your testimony is that your motivation was to do this to express your First Amendment rights?
I'm sure I have more than one motivation, but that was the one that I see clearly.
And you understood that you weren't going to stand in front of a bomber and stop a bomber from taking off. Is that right?
Please, Mr. Walker.
When your purpose was also connected with the war itself. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Birch?
By sitting down in the intersection on March 20th, what influence did you hope to have on other people who would learn about your sitting down in the intersection?
Well, I hope that people who saw me and respected me would think, yes, the war is wrong. Yes, there's somebody that's doing something she believes in. I'll do whatever I believe in.
Thank you. That's all, Your Honor.
Mr. De La Fuente?
I have no questions, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr.
Your
Tong.
May I?
Oh, did we pass?
No, I just remembered that I wanted to try to find corroboration of my statements. May I ask?
Sure.
Do you recall hearing me address the core group at one point and advise people that if they wanted to join me the next day to go support the Veterans for Peace in Sacramento, that they could leave with me and not be arrested?
Yes, I do. I thought it was a little crazy at the time.
Did you hear me address the larger group and invite people to continue past us and march on to the park and to follow the bagpiper?
I don't remember that. It didn't seem as crazy, probably.
Thank you.
Nothing else, I guess, Mr. Pong?
Ms. Palley, now you said that you began with the initial sitting down in the middle of the intersection of Pine and Broad. Is that correct? You started there before everybody else, right? You were one of the first people who sat down there. Is that correct?
I don't know. I didn't say that. I sat down there. I don't know how many people were already there.
And you stayed there until the arresting officers came. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now you said that you've lived in Nevada County for 28 years,
Yes.
and you're familiar with Nevada City, I would assume, right? So you're familiar with that Broad Street is one of the major intersections of town. Wouldn't you agree? And so is Pine Street. Is that a yes, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. And Pine Street, are you familiar with Pine Street as well?
Yes.
And that's another major street for Nevada City, is that correct? Now, during the whole time that you were sitting there, can you estimate about how many hours you sat there? Did you sit there for the whole time?
2.5.
And your testimony is that your motivation to be out there and sit there is to express your feelings and concerns about the war. Is that correct?
One of the reasons.
And you've also testified that you've tried other means of doing so, such as writing letters and bumper stickers and the like. That's also true, right?
Yes.
Now, when you were in the middle of the intersection, being familiar with the fact that it's a busy intersection, you knew that that would have an impact on traffic. Is that right?
No, I didn't consider that.
Pardon me?
I didn't consider that.
You did not consider that, or did you realize that?
I wasn't thinking about it.
What you were thinking of was that you wanted to make your statement, right? Make your expression of your feelings, right?
Yes.
Now, when you were in that group towards the end of the 2.5 hours, you heard Officer Lauren give out the order to disperse, did you not?
Someone, yes.
And you heard him tell you that at least twice, is that correct?
Someone, yes.
And after that, after being told to leave, you decide to remain in the intersection.
Yes.
And you were told that this was an unlawful assembly. You heard that, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay. And even then you decide to continue in your expression of your beliefs.
Yes.
Okay. And after Sergeant Gage gave this announcement, you heard and saw Under Sheriff Trotter come up and give directions for how to be arrested. Is that correct?
I don't know who they were.
Okay. But did you see an officer come and give directions on how to be arrested?
I don't remember.
Okay. Now, have you considered expressing your beliefs and concerns that day in any other manner except sitting in the middle of the street?
I've expressed my belief in many ways.
Okay. But sitting in the middle of the street, there are other alternatives. Wouldn't you agree?
I've used them.
And you could have used them again. Wouldn't you agree? You could use the
I
same.
do.
Okay. So there are other means that you could have done besides sitting in the middle of the intersection. Isn't that correct?
I do use other means besides
Okay.
sitting at intersections.
But aside from that, you could have done other things. But not in the past.
Answer.
No, it's not, Your Honor.
Let him finish his question.
The question is not what she has done in the past, but that particular date and time. The question is, would she agree that there were other alternatives?
It's been asked.
Right, okay, but they're not what she had done other in the past, before.
Well, I understand her position. I know what her answer's going to be, so let's move on.
Can I have it on the record, Your Honor? What is her answer?
Would you repeat your question?
On that date and time, on March 20th, aside from what you have done in the past, would you agree that there are other means of expressing your concerns besides sitting in the middle of the street for 2 hours?
At that moment, that was the best one.
I asked that to be stricken as not responsive.
That was responsive.
Certainly. Answer.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Nothing further, Mr. Palley.
Okay. Let me step down at this time, okay?
So that now is the time that it's very important to stand and say what you really believe. So I've told my kids that.
Solemnly state that the evidence you should give in this matter should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Your Honor, I'd like to have it on the record that we object to her testimony as late discovery, and I would also have an offer of proof as to relevance of her proposed testimony. We received her announcement of her proposed testimony this morning. No further advance notice on that.
Well, Ms. Kaufman indicated that she didn't realize she was available as a witness or didn't know about her until this weekend.
We didn't make that in discussions, we learned about her role as a member of the affinity group and decided, I contacted her on Sunday night, I believe it was. I think we've had this discussion.
Well, we have, but I think Mr. Ong just wants to make sure that it's on the record. You know, I will weigh in late disclosure and how we evaluate her credibility.
Thank you, Your Honor. I also asked for an offer of proof as for the relevancy of her testimony.
Well, we'll get into that question by question. Go ahead, Ms. Kaufman.
Ms. McDonald, do you recall the day of March 20th of this year?
I do.
And what did you do on that day?
I engaged in a peaceful protest that day.
Were you a member of a group called the Affinity Group?
Yes, I was.
And what was the purpose of the Affinity Group?
The purpose. My understanding of the Affinity Group was to make a symbolic statement as to our feelings of anguish regarding our going to war. And that symbolic statement was that we were at an intersection in history regarding war on one side, peace on the other.
And the Affinity Group met several times to discuss how to go about making the statement?
Yes.
And the group finally settled on this sitting down in the middle of Broad and Pine Street.
Yes.
In making that decision, was there a plan to shut off the intersection?
We need to go off. Come on back in my office. The attorneys. Miss Webb. Given the line of questioning that Ms. Kaufman has initiated, I became concerned that Ms. McDonald's answers might tend to incriminate herself. Given the theory of the people's case here and her discussions prior to the occurrence of the events in question, that is the set down in the middle of Broad Street and Pine Street, the district attorney could be creative and argue a felony conspiracy. The district attorney has graciously agreed not to consider the testimony of this witness and will not prosecute her for either the counts described in the present complaint or for any as a result of any testimony she gives here today. Is that correct, Mr.
That is correct, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Kaufman, you understand what we were concerned about?
Yes.
Okay, so you can go ahead and ask your questions, and you can feel free to answer them knowing that there will not be any consequences. All right?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. McDonald, during the discussions that the Affinity Group had, was there any discussion of a plan to block off Broad Street?
No.
Was there any discussion of blocking off any street in Nevada City?
No.
Was the goal of anyone, as far as you know, within the group to be arrested?
No.
Did you indeed then, on March 20th, sit down in the center of Broad Street?
I did.
And I just want to show you what's already been identified as Defendant's Exhibit D.
That's me.
And is that you sitting?
Yes, that is me.
Did you remain seated for the entire event?
I didn't.
At some point in time, did you make a decision to get up?
Yes.
And what caused you to make that decision?
I believe it was not a first warning of arrest, but I believe Chief Travato came and said something to us to the effect that if you hang around, you could be arrested. And I could not risk arrest, so I got up.
So when you initially sat down, you certainly did not plan on being arrested?
No.
In the planning of this event, did any of those involved in the planning anticipate that the marchers would encircle this group sitting in the center of the street? And what did you do when, sitting there, you discovered the marchers were surrounding you?
Well, eventually, I got up and encouraged people to move on. I encouraged people to not block the street. I encouraged people to at least keep moving in the crosswalks, but to please think about moving down to Condon Park or back to the Pioneer Park, where they could have a rally.
Did you hear me addressing the oncoming crowd to please follow the bagpiper and continue on down toward Pioneer Park?
Yes.
Can you testify as to whether there was any connection between the Peace Center and the Affinity Group?
There never was any connection between the
Objection
two.
on lack of foundation.
What does that mean?
What was the question again, Mr. Palmer?
As to whether there was any connection between the Peace Center that had organized the rally and the affinity group.
And you don't know, is that correct?
No, I do know.
The objection sustained. It isn't relevant. It isn't relevant. Anything else? Okay. You're next in line, Mr. Walker.
The affinity group met approximately how many times? And was the topic of blocking traffic ever discussed in your presence?
Blocking traffic?
Yeah.
I think the issue did come up that if we were to block traffic, we were afraid of people's welfare. We didn't want to block. We didn't want to make a total block of traffic.
When you arrived at Broad and Pine, did you see Miss Palley already sitting down?
Yes.
Did you take up your position on your bucket as
No.
planned? What did you do?
My purpose at that point was being peacekeeper and support, so I just watched what was going on and made sure that everybody was okay.
When you first arrived at that intersection, did you recall seeing whether or not vehicles were still going through the intersection?
They were.
And at some later time, did you notice that there were no longer any vehicles going through the intersection?
Yes.
When was that?
Well, I assumed there were no vehicles going through the intersection as soon as we were surrounded by hundreds of people.
And again, how many of these hundreds of people were part of this affinity group that you belong to?
12, 13.
Okay. And did you personally encourage anybody to come and sit down?
No, never.
Ever? In your presence, did you ever hear any of the other affinity group members encouraging people to come and sit down?
No.
Did you ever hear anyone encouraging the crowd itself to try to shut down the town?
Never.
Thank you.
Mr. Birch?
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Della Fuente?
Yes, sir. Just very briefly. Ms. McDonald, your testimony was that Ms. Webb was telling the people to follow the bagpiper to the park. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you hear anyone else in that group that was seated in those buckets tell the people not to block the street, continue on? Do you recall that?
I don't.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Palmer?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. McDonald, you said you had sat in the group near the beginning when it first coalesced in the middle, right? And then more and more people came and sat around you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your testimony was that about second or third warning by Chief Trovato, you decided to leave because you didn't want to get arrested.
No, I said as soon as he came.
As soon as he came.
And made a warning, which was quite some time into our sitting.
Okay. So, based on that warning, you decided to leave and not be subject to arrest.
I decided to get up and help clear the area. I always knew that there was the possibility of arrest.
But isn't it your testimony that you cannot risk being arrested? That's why
Yes,
you left.
that was known for weeks before this.
Okay. Now, you had also testified that you had gone around to ask people to move on and not to block the intersection. That's what you just said, right?
I encouraged people to move along, yes.
Right, and not to sit in the middle of the intersection.
No, I never said it to anybody not to sit in the middle of the intersection.
So what did you...
I did not say that.
Okay, what did you tell these people?
I encouraged people to keep moving in the crosswalks, but at the same time was encouraging people that if they wanted to gather, to please leave the area and move on to Condon Park or Plainview.
Right. So that your advice and encouragement was to get people moving and not be in the middle of the intersection. Is that correct? Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
And how long have you lived in Nevada County?
30 years.
So you're familiar with Nevada City, right?
Very.
So you know that that intersection is heavily trafficked, right?
It wasn't at the time.
But it's normally heavily trafficked. Is that correct?
Sometimes.
And to your recollection, those activities sitting in the middle of the intersection would impede the flow of traffic?
It did not until all of the other people joined the group.
Right. Now, during the time you stayed in there, you said you recalled Miss Webb being there. Was that true?
Yes.
And did you stay there, continue to stay there after you left?
I never left. I was always there.
Pardon me, but you said you left because Chief Travato, based on his
I
advice.
stood up and left the center.
So you left that group sitting in the middle.
But I was still there.
You left that center group, right?
Yes.
You're no longer
I was
part
no
of that.
longer sitting.
Okay.
Just
And
a
what-
moment, just a moment. One at a time. You wait till he's through with this
Okay.
question, you wait till she's through with her answer.
So you left that group, you left from that center group, is that correct?
I got up, and I was a part of that group all along. I got up from sitting in the center,
Okay. And where did you go?
a few feet away.
And during that time, Ms. Webb stayed within that group, right?
I can't remember the time frame of,
Let's say at the time that you got up and walked short distance away, was Ms. Webb still in that group?
at that point, with a first warning, yes. I think that there are quite a few people still sitting there that weren't there at the end.
Did you remain near that group until the officers came by to make the arrests?
Yes.
So you heard Sergeant Gage give the order to disperse, didn't you?
Yes.
And where were you about the time that the people were getting arrested?
I'm on the sidewalk.
Nothing further, Ms. McDonald.
Okay, you can step down, Ms.
No,
McDonald.
I
Thank
have
you for
some
coming today.
redirect, Your Honor.
Pardon? No?
I have some redirect.
No. We've gone far enough with this witness. Okay.
Well, I think there needs to be some clarification as to where Ms. Webb was, and
Ms. Kaufman, no, I've ruled on that. So thank you for coming today, okay?